Kia ora everyone and welcome back to Humankind. As you can see on screen, I'm just moving through from the Neolithic era into the Ancient era, and that's where you're fronted with an important decision. Which culture, i.e. empire, civilization, whatever you want to call it, which culture will you play as? Not only will I have gameplay on screen of me making that decision, but I'm also going to throw up some information on all of the Ancient era cultures' traits, emblematic quarters, their unique building, and emblematic unit, their unique units. I'll throw up their yields and some pictures as well, so you don't just have to hear me shout numbers at you throughout this video. Anyway, without any further ado, let's jump straight in and discuss their traits, quarters, and units. I won't be covering their unique affinity actions because those aren't assigned to specific cultures, but rather to types of cultures, i.e. expansionist cultures can claim territories from other cultures. Those aren't unique. Let's cover the uniques. For starters, first up, it's the Babylonians. Now, the Babylonians are, as you would expect, a scientific culture, okay? They have +2 science per research technologies within their capital. That's their trait. Their emblematic quarter is the astronomy house. Your researchers will give you 1 additional food, 1 additional science. You'll lose some stability, which is normal for all emblematic quarters, except those which specifically provide it. However, you will get +3 science per adjacent farmer's quarter, so there's a nice synergy between growth and science, and each researcher slot will also, of course, provide those additional benefits. You'll get +1 researcher slot. The emblematic unit, whose name I won't even try to pronounce, is actually quite an impressive unit. It's an anti-cavalry unit. It's a close combat unit. It receives +5 combat strength when fighting against mounted enemies, right? So it's more situational, but very strong if your neighbor happens to be a mounted culture. Also, they get +3 combat strength when standing on friendly extensions. So that's within those friendly territories. This includes districts and quarters and resource extractors, right? So it's your sort of improvements, so to speak, within your territory. This makes their unit a really great defensive unit, both against cavalry, but also just in general to protect your friendly territory. You can see that the Babylonians are a great culture to pick if you're interested in science and defense, growth and science. Next up, we have the Assyrians, who are going to paint a slightly different picture. The Assyrians are an expansionist culture, and as such, their trait, Siege Masters, provides +1 movement to land combat units. Very powerful. Not just combat, in fact, but all. +1 land movement speed to all units. Their emblematic quarter, the Dunu, is a fortification quarter, providing +10 district defense and +1 combat strength for units in or adjacent to it. Units also spawn on it. You can think of this as sort of an encampment that provides additional strength, fortification, and allows you to choose where you want your units to spawn. Very useful if you have an enemy far away from your city. Their emblematic unit builds on this as well, the Assyrian Rider. It's a cavalry unit, so stay away from the Babylonians. You receive, it's a close combat unit that ignores enemy zones of control. It's particularly good at running down ranged units, of course. Otherwise, though, it's a fairly standard unit, fairly standard strength. But it is also a pillaging unit, which is what you would expect from this kind of culture. So you'll generate additional gold when you destroy outposts. Nice to have, obviously a more aggressive unit, but actually also combining it with the Dunu, you can also get a feeling that it's a little bit defensive too. Next up, we have the Egyptians. Now, the Egyptians are a builder-oriented culture, and therefore you're gonna get a lot of production out of them. Their trait, Grand Planners, provides +1 industry on districts producing industry. It also modifies their cost, reducing them by 10%. Really nice, right? Allows you to build, allows you to grow your productive capacity. Their emblematic quarter is, of course, the Egyptian pyramid. This is a really great one. It provides you with influence, 3 industry, the standard stability deduction, but +3 industry from adjacent makers' quarter, and also an additional slot for industrial types in your city. We can sort of see a really similar thing to the Babylonians district here, but instead of providing science, it provides industry. The emblematic unit, the Markabata, is a ranged unit. It can move and fire, so you can fully move before you attack, making it very strong. And as a ranged unit, of course, it's less effective when it can't see its target. You'll lose 8 strength when you're defending against close combat attacks as well. So close combat attacks, meaning melee attacks, naturally you're weak to them, but you can move and fire, so you're fast, right? A fairly powerful unit. Nothing to write home about, though. You won't be necessarily conquering empires with it, but nice to defend your homeland and move around the map relatively quickly. Next up, we have the Harappans, and these guys are interesting. Fertile inundations is their unique trait. It provides +1 food on districts that are producing food, and +1 food from rivers. So here we have a culture that is more specific to the map rather than being generically good, okay? So if you've got rivers, they're great. If you've not got rivers, not so much. The emblematic quarter is the canal network, standard stability reduction, and it provides +1 food on neighboring producing food tiles. It also provides +1 farmer's slot on the city, and it's considered within the game to be a river. So you do get that +1 food on a river and some stacking bonuses there. Again, though, you're probably only going to want to take these guys if you have rivers to play with. Their emblematic unit is a really interesting one. It's the runner. It's a close combat melee unit, similar to a scout in terms of strength, like if you want to think about it that way, right? It's fast, it can see things, not necessarily the strongest though, because it is just the dude running along. However, as a discoverer, it generates money when collecting curiosities, those goody huts hidden around the map. So you can play to your advantage here, you can run around the map, generate some gold, and grow up your cities with the canal network. Again, I have to stress, I would stay away from these guys unless you've actually got a river to play with, maybe a few. Next up, we have the Hittites. It's a militaristic culture, okay? You receive lust for war, +1 combat strength across the board. Pretty good. Is +1 a game changer? No, but really nice to have that generic benefit. The emblematic quarter is the Awari. It automatically upgrades the regular outpost, so nice upgrade there to get to a city. It is used as a land spawn, as we would expect. Also spawn point for neighboring cities. And of course it's fortified, right? You don't, however, receive any additional fortification bonuses from it, unlike what we might see with a culture like the Assyrians. However, their emblematic unit is a heavy cavalry, and this thing is kind of a beast. It hits hard, because it can charge enemies down. It receives bonus combat strength, that's a +3, if it's attacking non-adjacent enemies. So this is a very powerful charging unit. It also is equipped with suppression, which means that the targeted unit can either move or attack next turn, but not both, right? So you run at them, you charge them down with your immense power, and then they're forced to choose, do they want to run or do they want to fight? They can't do both. This is really a really powerful suppressive ability on an emblematic unit that is already really strong. If you're playing an aggressive early game, this unit is the one you want, although their emblematic quarter doesn't provide as many benefits. So you're going to be less city building, more aggression. Next up, we have the Mycaeans. Another really interesting one and another militaristic one. The Mycaeans have a more useful emblematic quarter, but potentially a less useful unit than the Hittites. Let me tell you why. So for starters, their trait modifies unit cost down 25%, and your units will receive additional experience when they're first trained or created. That's great. That's a really nice bonus to have, granting you +1 combat strength. The emblematic quarter provides +2 combat strength in combat for units in or adjacent to it, so again, nice defensive bonus. It provides +5 district fortification to itself and its neighbors, +5 stability. So unlike most quarters, this one actually gives you stability. So if you're struggling with stability, you might want to pick this up. It's also, of course, a land unit spawn, as we know, but it does also increase the movement point cost of tiles within its adjacent area by 1. What that means is it provides a suppressive effect. It slows units down around it. Not only is it more fortified, but you'll also slow the flow of enemy military as they come on through. Their unique unit, the Promachoi, is a fairly standard sort of swordsman warrior type unit. It provides +4 combat strength when attacking during the first round, though. So your first attack within the battle will be stronger. It's a nice bonus. These guys are kind of the opposite of the Hittites in that they have a really useful district, but a less useful unit. So you can pick and choose which one you'd prefer. I would probably prefer these guys, to be fair. Next up, we have the Nubians, the noobs themselves. Now, the Nubians are an interesting one because they make a lot of money. Big bucks, merchant empire, look no more. These guys provide +4 gold or money on each luxury resource deposit and strategic resource deposits. So if you've got some resources around, like your dyes and so on and so forth, you're going to be making more buck off them. This combos quite nicely with the Meroe pyramids, not to be confused with the Egyptian ones. These ones make a lot more buck. You get +2 industry, so you're going to be more productive from them. You also receive a flat bonus of +2 money and that classic +3 adjacency bonus. This time, of course, it's money and it's per adjacent maker's quarters. So there's a synergy here between industry and gold. You'll also receive +1 trader slot and the standard -10 stability. Their emblematic unit is a fun one because it's kind of just an archer, but a slightly better one. It's a ranged unit, the Tar City Archers. It's less effective when it can't see its target, as we're familiar with, and receives that standard -8 combat penalty when it's defending against melee attacks. However, the upside to having this ranged unit in particular is its exceptional accuracy. It can move above obstacles without penalties. So this unit is more flexible in terms of moving around the map. This will help you defend easier, but also potentially attack easier. I would recommend more of a defensive, trading, economic oriented route with the Nubians though, so you're probably going to be defending and nipping around the map with these guys. Next up, we have the Olmecs, an Assyrian influential culture. They receive +1 influence on territories. Nice to have in the early game, and if you're a player who struggles with influence, look no further than the Olmecs, because I think these are a pretty good pick for you, to be honest. Their emblematic quarter, the Olmec head, provides even more influence, +2. It also has an adjacency bonus with farmers' quarters, where you'll get an additional influence per each farmer's quarter. It also provides you with some food, +3 food, so you can grow. Nice and tall, and an additional slot for farmers at the cost of 10 stability. Their emblematic unit is a fun one. It's javelin throwers. So the javelin throwers are a ranged unit, so they receive that standard penalty that all ranged units receive, -8 combat strength versus melee. However, as an ambusher, this unit receives a +4 combat strength on difficult terrain tiles. Those ones that are slightly harder to navigate and leave you feeling stuck. Right, the cliffs, the marsh, the so on and so forth. Nice to have, and very flexible, and you can play that to your advantage. Again, seemingly a more defensive strategy. Next up, we have the Phoenicians. The Carthaginians, as we might otherwise call them. The Phoenicians are, again, a merchant culture. However, they're slightly different. So their trait is trading pioneers, which basically modifies the cost of constructible buyouts by 20%. So if you're building a building and you've got a lot of gold and you just want to speed up the production, you can buy it at a 20% discount. This, of course, combos really nicely with their unique harbour, because it wouldn't be Carthage in a game if they didn't have a harbour. In this case, it's the Haven. You get +2 money per adjacent coastal water tile, also per adjacent lake. You get the standard stability detraction, but you get +1 trader slot in your city. It, of course, replaces the harbour. Your boats will spawn there, and units can embark without any movement penalties from it. It's a harbour. Now, in Humankind, the ocean is not as powerful as the land, and that's something to bear in mind. Unless you're playing on a map that is specifically built more around the ocean, you might not receive as much benefit from this as you would from another district that is land-based. However, its adjacency bonuses are really powerful, right? +2 money per lake and coastal tile. So you have the ability to either have a really crappy game with Carthage, with the Phoenicians, or a really powerful money game. Their emblematic unit also adds to the specialization, the coastal ocean specialization. It's the bireme. It's a boarding vessel with no real special rules, except for the fact that as a navigator, it does take damage per consecutive turns when it's in deep water. This is a very standard unit. Nothing to write home about here. And last, but certainly not least, it's the culture that I chose in this video. Zhou, the early aesthete culture, the other aesthete culture. Their trait is harmonious thought. It provides +2 stability on districts. It applies on main plazas and the administrative centers as well. That's really nice to have. Stability will keep your empire happy and growing and within your control. Don't underestimate it. It also gives you more flexibility to change your laws in ways and customs that might be a little less appealing to your empire. The emblematic quarter, the Confucian school, builds on this as well, and I think it is very powerful, particularly though in certain scenarios. It provides +3 stability, again, more stability, fantastic, +1 science, +5 science per adjacent mountain tile. If you have mountains in your territory like I do right there, you're gonna get some real benefit out of this school. It also, of course, gives you +1 researcher slot. Important to note, it doesn't take away from stability, it adds to it, right? So this is a different district than most. Their emblematic unit you might get less use out of, right? Their main thing is stability and science. Stable science near the mountains is what they do, and as the Zhou, it's really powerful. The emblematic unit is a heavy cavalry unit, so again, it's that charging type of unit, right? You can charge the enemy down with additional combat strength if attacking non-adjacent enemies. And the Mandate of Heaven ability gives you bonus combat strength when your stability is high. A +3 bonus, not to be laughed at, particularly when stacked with your charge bonus. That's a +6 heavy cavalry charge bonus, providing your stability is high, which, let's be real, it should be, because the Zhou do stability well. And I think that concludes this video. Thank you so much for watching my guide through the ancient era cultures. One of the most significant decisions you'll make, and it's worth noting, you can stick with these cultures. Some of them, I think, lend themselves better to transcending through the ages than others, right? There are going to be some benefits that you might just frankly not want to keep around. But then there'll be others that do better with age, and that is ultimately up to you to decide. But one example that springs to mind for me is the Babylonians, right? +2 science per technology researched in the capital. If you transcend with the Babylonians, their trait gets better with time, whereas others sort of taper off, and you might not want to transcend and keep them through the eras. Anyway, that concludes this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like rating and turning that thumb blue, and I'll catch you in the next one for more Humankind.